Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblywoman Claudia Tenney. Claudia Tenney represents the 101st Assembly District. I'm going to cheat here and tell you folks that the 101st District includes 7 counties, starting in the north from Oneida and Herkimer and Otsego, winding its way through Delaware, Sullivan, Ulster, and ending down in Orange County down in the Catskills. And we want to thank you folks all throughout that. I can't even call it a region. It's like 3 different regions of the state that make up the 101st District. Thank you folks for joining us. Claudia Tenney, nice to see you.
You're a little rusty on that.
I am. It's been a little while since I've done that, and so I cheated, but I was prepared.
That's all right.
I was prepared, like any good scout. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, we've got a theme to talk about today, and that as we were looking at some of the things that you've been involved with on the Assembly floor and what's going on here at the state capitol, the theme of today's Assembly calendar is flawed processes.
And ethics.
And ethics, which is a flawed process of sorts.
Absolutely. In Albany, yes.
Maybe the most flawed of them all.
Dysfunction, we are.
Yeah, so we've got a lot to talk about, and we're going to try to do it all in 15 minutes. Let's start with the first one, going back chronologically.
Okay.
That was elections of the members to the State Board of Regents.
Yes.
This is this has been a long time bugaboo with members of the legislature that it's all a numbers game.
Right.
Whoever has the numbers appoints, basically, even though there is an election, appoints who the members of the regents are.
Right. You just have... We're outnumbered, so we don't get to choose who the regents are. The speaker chooses the person because we can in the Assembly we have 150, in the Senate they have 63. The Democrats outnumber the Republicans, so we virtually have no say in choosing who the regents are.
You participated in the process, as it were. I mean, it's kind of a rigged process, by standing up and advocating for the election of an individual.
Right. I had an outstanding person from, not actually technically in my assembly district, but in my former assembly district, who we decided on the Republican side that he was going to be our choice. He was our best choice to put up against the Democratic nominee. Unfortunately, he didn't make it, but he was a great candidate, very enthusiastic guy. Let's
look and see what you had to say during that part of the nomination process. We'll be back with more with Claudia Tenney.
As a member of the Education Committee and also as a resident of the 5th Judicial District, it's with great pleasure that I second the nomination of John Sheffield. Mr. Sheffield is exactly the type of person that we need as a regent. He's a beloved teacher. He's a tireless advocate for our students. He's also a former probation officer handling juvenile issues, so he's spent a lot of time counseling and working with students. One thing about Mr. Sheffield that you will undeniably know if you meet him is that he is passionate, he's energetic, and he's inspiring. And if anyone saw his interview before the board or before the Education Committee, you will be rushing to the chambers to try to vote for Mr. Sheffield. And for those reasons, and also his excellent resume and his history of teaching our students and advocating for them, I highly recommend the vote for Mr. John Sheffield as the regent in the 5th Judicial District. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
So you had somebody you liked and you respected and you thought was well qualified, and you stood up and made the nomination and went through the process, but you did kind of know in the back of your mind the fix was in and that he would not win the seat.
Yes, we did, and I lobbied a number of people on the other side to know that he was a strong advocate against Common Core, and he supports the students and the teachers and the parents. And I actually got a couple of anti-Common Core senator, or at least one of the senators was able to vote with us, and a few other people. So that movement got at least a little bit of a voice, and he did. He was a great guy that we really wanted to see happen, but maybe next time, maybe we'll get him through.
If nothing else, by making that point, it shows the folks that are watching this program, the people out in the public who may think, well, at least there's a board of regents that's looking over things to make sure the politicians don't screw it up and such. Well, the board is appointed by the politicians.
Absolutely, and that's what the point we were trying to make is just because we have superlatively qualified candidates doesn't mean they're going to win the day. The politicians are going to win the day, and that's exactly what we're trying to stop.
So then there was the
education, and our students should win the day.
Then there was the recent budget process.
Yes, another
probably the most important thing the legislature does all year.
Absolutely.
And it was a strange process this year. I mean, nobody knew in the final hours or days what was going on, what the budget was going to consist of, yet you started voting on bills. even though
Yes.
you didn't really know what was in the bills.
Absolutely, we do this every year. You know, we have to pass it before we find out what's in it. Nancy Pelosi famously said about Obamacare, and that seems to be what rules the day in the state legislature. And we didn't even get it. Some of these bills. I went down to the bill room and I got the copies of the bills, and you can see them on my desk. I'm probably not in this clip, but there are thousands of pages. How can we vote on something that we don't know what's in it? And so we have been trying for years to stop this so-called message of necessity. The message of necessity is sent down by the governor and gives the legislature an option to bypass the 3-day aging rule that applies to the Senate and the Assembly. And so what that means is once a bill becomes live, we have 3 days as state representatives, and the public has 3 days to find out what's in that bill before we actually can vote on it. The message of necessity gives us the option to bypass that and go directly to a vote. I think it's wrong. I don't think we should be voting on bills within a message of necessity, especially something as so important with $145 billion or whatever we had in the budget. It's a complete denial to the state taxpayers. It's a terrible process. So we were trying to figure out a way to get around the message of necessity, and I'm an attorney, so I met up with another attorney in our chamber, and I said, how can we do this? And we looked up in the rules, and there is a provision that allows us to table bills based on a number of things, but in this case, not allowing the aging period to occur. So I did a motion to table the hearing of these bills, and we actually continued and did this motion to table all the other budget bills unsuccessfully, but it was another procedure that we tried that we don't think has ever been tried before. So we made our best effort to stop it, but I think it was an interesting item for the voters. And at least we tried.
An interesting gambit in the budget game at the state capitol. Let's take a quick look at the first one of these that went down.
I'd like to make a motion to the chair, please. Like to move under, yes, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move under Assembly Rule 2, Section 4, Subsection 4, to table this bill.
On Ms. Tenney's motion, clerk will record the vote.
And what happened was the motion to table was defeated, the debate continued, and you're talking about passing, this was like the enabling legislation. You didn't even know what the budget numbers were yet by the time you started voting on some of these other bills. It was all kind of piecemeal.
It was insane. And also because we tried to figure out a way to stop the message of necessity, because when it comes out of committee, the budget bills, the message of necessity is attached. So we were trying to figure out a way to defeat the message of necessity, but this was a way to postpone the bill. But of course, the Democrats defeated our tabling motion, and off we went to vote on bills that we haven't seen, didn't know anything about.
Included major issues like the minimum wage.
Increasing debt, giving huge slush fund money to the governor, the executive, that's unconstitutional, all kinds of backdoor borrowing schemes, everything that we've been fighting against as legislators was all allowed to go forward thanks to the Democrats voting down that motion.
And that kind of slush fund and ability to manipulate monies leads us to the next of the flawed processes in our little themed program today, and that's the ethics. We saw just this week the sentencing of former Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver to 12 years in prison. He had to forfeit $5.2 million of his own monies, a fine of $1.75 million. We're about to see the sentencing of the former Senate leader in just a few days down in New York City. And a lot of that has to do with their abilities to tap into monies and use them, in the Speaker's case, use them for his own personal gain. The money went around to one person and back to him, and that is probably the most flawed of all the flawed processes that there are here at the state capitol.
And it's all what we call pay to play, and it's alive and well in New York State. It almost seems that in order to get a state contract, you've got to give money to a politician. It should be the other way around. We should be prohibiting donations to politicians in exchange for a state contract. I mean, I think anyone that gets a state contract there should be a moratorium on their ability to even give a donation to any politicians. And I think that's something we should institute. Another thing that you didn't mention, so Sheldon Silver gets 12 years. He went home and had dinner last night. because he's in the middle of an appeal process, so he doesn't have to go to jail until that is concluded. Here's the issue, though. He's still receiving a taxpayer-funded pension for violating our ethics laws. Same with Dean Skelos and numerous other politicians who are being taken out. We have to end this. We have to stop funding pensions for people who violate our ethics laws as state legislators who are holding the public trust and voting on these issues. It is absolutely a must that we do this. And we have tried in the Assembly minority to advance this bill and get it passed. And it's been watered down, removed, dismissed, and not discussed by the Assembly Democrats. They've tried to put in bills that give all kinds of exemptions and all kinds of outs for politicians who violate the public trust, and it has to end. And that's one of the biggest problems that we have in Albany.
It's kind of pathetic.
It's totally pathetic.
To say that a legislature that has had two of its leaders, so many of its members currently sitting in prison, can't get its act together and figure out at least even token gestures. I mean, because people are always going to find their way around the law. But for penalties, for example, the pension forfeiture that you're talking about, this legislature has done nothing since any of this has happened.
Absolutely. We've tried. The Assembly minority, we've tried to advance legislation to end this. And we have been cut off, just like we were cut off in the budget process to stop the message of necessity and denying the voters, denying the taxpayers the 3-day waiting period. We've denied the taxpayers on just about everything that we try to get through in the state assembly. And it's interesting that the Senate sometimes goes along with these things, or they allow it to happen because they just are, they hang in the balance. They just lost a seat, so now the Democrats are dominating on that. It's really a complex issue. But here's another thing on the pensions, and I know that my colleague, Assemblyman Fitzpatrick, I co-sponsor the bill that he has that would take the political class, politicians, elected officials, out of these defined benefit pensions and put them in a 401k type system. And then when we go to negotiate, we are not in the same position as other public employees and those people who are earning their pensions. Let them earn their pensions, let them negotiate. But as people who actually vote directly on giving ourselves benefits or not, take us out of that system. And I think that you will see this huge scramble in Albany. The career politician syndrome that we seem to have here will go away because now, instead of the taxpayers being put on the hook for funding pensions, it's going to be us. We're going to be responsible for making good, prudent decisions on what happens with the state government, not increasing debt to unprecedented levels that we had this year, not getting into backdoor borrowing, and particularly not getting into these pay-to-play schemes where politicians are given tons of money by independent businesses, and in exchange, they get state contracts, millions in state contracts. That's what pay-to-play is, and it's alive and well in the state capitol, and we have to end it. And
we're down about our last minute or so, but you've got probably a dozen I don't know the exact number, but a dozen legislators in prison right now. You had the arrest, the conviction, and the sentencing, one to come, of 2 legislative leaders. You've got a federal investigator looking into the governor and his staff. You've got that same investigator and others looking into the mayor of New York City and his staff, all involving the same thing. That kind of corruption, the pay-to-play thing. Give me the money, we'll do some favors for you, you do some favors for me.
Right. The Buffalo Billion is the ultimate pay-to-play scandal. I mean, and interestingly enough on this Buffalo Billion money, which is money going to Buffalo for Solar City and a number of other contracts, it's showing that it does pay to play. If you give a ton of money to Andrew Cuomo and his people, you will get state contracts and millions in taxpayer money. And it's funny that this actually goes back to this. The money is being funneled through an organization called the Fort Schuyler Management Group that's a division of SUNY Poly right in Marcy, New York. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but I know subpoenas were issued by the U.S. Attorney to that organization. It's going to be a really interesting couple of weeks.
Claudia Tenney. It's always interesting here in Albany.
Yes, so stay tuned, as Preet Bharara would say.
Stay tuned. Claudia Tenney, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And we hope you folks will stay tuned and join us soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.